Good evening, my friends. I want to share with you a fabulous way to find clarity and create clarity in your process and understand if you're feeling stuck, how to move forward, and how to identify what is keeping you stuck. This is super simple. So, pardon me, this COVID thing is still holding on. I encourage you to get out a sheet of paper or make a note on your phone, whatever works for you. And there's three things that I encourage you to think about and write down and maybe take time to observe over the course of a day or a couple of days of consistent observation. The first one is, what are my most frequent recurring thoughts? That's really helpful. And a lot of times when we're stuck in limbic impairment, a lot of times our frequent recurring thoughts are around things like, I can't do this. It's too hard. It's not going to work. Or constantly factoring in symptoms. Well, I want to do that, but I'm going to have symptoms, or it might give me symptoms, or I'm afraid that it might give me symptoms, so I shouldn't do that, or I can't do that. So that can just taking note. It could be anything. Those are just some really common, unhelpful trauma loop, patterns that are going to keep you stuck if they're continuing to run in the background. That are pretty common. So, and maybe there's good ones in there too. So write those down and celebrate them. Maybe you consistently have the thought of, I can do this. I'm strong. I am more persistent than my limbic system. Whatever your positive thoughts are, write those down too. The second one is, what are my most common emotional states throughout the day? This one is so key, especially if you're feeling stuck and you don't know why, you can't identify why. Look at what are your most common recurring emotional states throughout the day. And again, it's good to take stock of both. At this point, we're actually wanting to find the ones that are negative so that we can start to shift them or start to find clarity and understanding as to why you might be stuck. It's very common, even if you're, and this is, if you feel like you're stuck, you've been at this for a while, and you pause and and you're like, well, but why am I stuck? Like I think I'm doing everything right. I think I'm doing all of applying all the principles of neuroplasticity. And then you look at your day and realize, I'm still in stress and overwhelm or shut down in depression or in a negative emotional state or a negative mindset, like half the day, every day, throughout the day, however it's portioned out. That's a good place where this is encouraging because you're identifying what you can change. It's very easy to identify of, oh, okay, well, I can work on that. And if I, change my state from being negative 6 hours of a 12-hour day or 8 hours of a 14-hour day or whatever it is, and that's really good. I can shift that, and there's a really good chance things are going to change for me in terms of my progress and my states and how I feel and symptoms and all that sort of thing. So that's good. That's really good. So take note of what those are. And again, maybe they're positive ones, and you can say, well, what am I doing during those times when I'm in a more positive state? What is working for me? And how can I apply more of that? The last one is a little bit more, I'll explain this one. It can be a little bit harder to grasp, but noticing patterns that you're living in response to. This is huge. This is one of the biggest things that keeps people in recovery stuck, is we're living in response to a fear. A really common basic one that's very generalized in early recovery is living in response to the fear that you simply can't recover. This fear that it won't work, the fear that either it won't work, it doesn't work, or it won't work for me. Those are all kind of variations on the same thing. And what happens when we have maybe the thought or the impulse to use our tools, to practice visualization, to elevate the mood, and then there's this feeling that comes in, but I can't really recover, so why even bother? Like, this isn't accessible. This isn't real. I don't really think this is actually going to work. This is just one example. I personally had one. If things that are negative are triggering, this might be triggering, just step away and come back. I had one a lot of times in recovery where I was just terrified of losing my kids. And I've seen a lot of similar ones in other women who are recovering where they're just so afraid that they won't recover in time to be able to have a child before their biological, clock stops ticking, that they never make any progress because they're just so afraid it won't happen soon enough that they're completely stalled in their recovery. So things like of that nature, where there's this backdrop, this whole context of living in response to this fear or this concern. And it's just a fear, right? And a lot of times, a lot of them they're in a sense legitimate fears, but nonetheless, they keep you completely stuck. So creating an alternate story around that, which is probably a topic for another video, and something also for coaching, is really helpful. But just basically becoming aware of your stuck points in itself is incredibly helpful. So there's some exercises you can do to find clarity as to why you might be stuck, and some ways to change those thought patterns, emotional states, and start to live in response to the belief that if I desire something, it can happen, and that recovery is possible, and I choose it, and I continue to act into that every day. The more you act on it, the more real it feels, and the more success you find. Love you guys.